welcome to this Buckinghamshire Business First podcast. And this time we're going to be talking about carbon and carbon emissions. So would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners, Dan?
Absolutely, that's fine, Philippa. Brilliant. Well, yeah, it's Dan Cope. I'm the Climate Change Programme Manager with BBF. So working alongside yourself, Philippa. I've been with the organisation now since 2018, but predominantly, really, you know, our core mission here is to help the businesses within Bucks to traverse the desert that is the environmental stage at the moment. So any support they need, be it financial support or perhaps advice support, we're here.
So lots of businesses talk to Buckinghamshire Business First about lowering their carbon emissions or the race to zero or understanding their carbon footprint. Now, you and I have known each other for many years, and I've always found your insight and your hints and tips extremely useful. At BBF, we started to look seriously at this agenda, I think, back in 2019, when the UK government then sort of announced the target to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions to 0% by 2050. And we all heard the noise that followed that announcement. So 2050 wasn't soon enough, we couldn't get to 0%, etc., etc., etc. And like many other businesses, I think I had a list as long as my arm of why our business had not got seriously involved. But before then, we were in serviced offices. The impact that our little company could make, you know, was it really relevant? If everyone else wasn't doing it, what was the point of us doing it, etc., etc., etc. And talking to you, I realised that no action was not an option. And that saying was ringing in my ears about a journey of 1,000 steps, beginning with that single step. And we, between us all, team included, we reckoned that BBF needed to start taking action, however small that was going to be, instead of sticking our heads in the sand about a problem that was just not going to go away. So very early on, we realised that if we were going to show any progress, we needed to understand our starting point. And you talked to us about carbon footprinting. So can you just talk to our listeners about carbon footprinting and why you would bother?
Yeah, of course, Philippa, you've really cut straight to it there, haven't you? No warm-up whatsoever. It's a brilliant question. And to be honest, it's the one we get asked the most at BBF. Businesses who are most uncertain about their kind of environmental future likely are getting stuck on the carbon footprint. The sad thing is the carbon footprint is the start of the journey. So we look at this road to net zero to 2050. Well, that's great. We know where we're going. But the real question is right now, not in 28 years, but right now, how do we actually get on that road? And the carbon footprinting is a really big part of that. So for those who aren't aware, very simply, carbon footprinting, be it a person or a business, over that year of kind of activity, any activity, that could be driving a car, it could be having your laptop on for an hour, or even making a call from your phone. Everything will likely have a carbon footprint. So what we do is we count all of that up very simply, and it is simple. And at the end, we have this overall figure that we can kind of associate with an entity, a business or an individual. Now, what we've seen is there is a resistance to undertaking this work. And many businesses are perhaps still, even with support, reluctant sometimes to broach the subject, I think would be a fair way to describe it. It is a tough transition, but a transition that they will have to do. And I think what you would have realised when we carried out the footprint of BBF was that actually when you've created that, when you've got it and you look at it on the paper or the screen, it's actually very simple, very practical, and what's more, it makes sense to you because it's your business. You know what we do in our business, so you're going to see that in turn in that activity, and that in itself is actually really empowering. But there's no obstacle there. This is information of activities that you already know. So granted, of course, you might not know how to work out the exact factors. Well, that's fine. We can help with that. We have programs specifically designed to do that. All we really need at that stage is gas bills, electric bills, because by and large, that will be a real bulk of the business's footprint. So it's not the obstacle itself, it's the perception of the obstacle. I think that is the hang up here, that actually, even with 30 minutes of just checking this out online, you'd actually feel a lot more empowered. So carbon footprinting, really essential to start at the beginning to see, well, what does our stage look like, And then even better is every win that you get beyond then, actually you can fully account, you can fully take credit for, because it's there. You're constantly reducing that baseline figure, and that's really rewarding. Not to sound contrived, it is, and it is something you can get staff behind as well if you get their buy-in. So the benefits are numerous. It's just a case of setting that time aside. And it would be, wrong of me not to mention, Philippa, we've obviously got the Boost Green credentials, which our members can take advantage of in Buckinghamshire if they're involved in hospitality, tourism and leisure, or support that industry. And we can actually help them create that full footprint, from 0 to 100.
And it's very motivating knowing your starting point and then watching the impact that you're having on that figure year on year. So the last 3 years have been really challenging for lots of businesses. The COVID pandemic, the conflict in the Ukraine, the energy crisis, escalating costs. So you often say that the primary driver for our members to look at their carbon emissions is very often the need to reduce costs. But what value can they get in real terms? Do you have a figure? Is it limited to just using less energy on site? Is that what we're talking about?
A really, really important question, Philippa. Predominantly yes, but with a big caveat. So it is important to say that where there are many factors on what benefits come about from kind of decarbonising or tackling your energy bills. But the reduction of cost is huge. One fact that we often share with members that's been released by the FSB, Federation of Small Businesses, is that the average small business will see an additional £10,000 this year on their energy bill from last year. And that's going from a baseline of £5,000. So last year, 5,000, this year, 15,000. I mean, that is very real money. And we know for our members that some of them, they've been treading, they've been innovative. They've done whatever they can to survive the onslaught that we've seen since 2020. And the energy bills, well, for someone treading water, that's, adding another £10 of weight onto them, or I guess £10,000, if as the case may be. So yes, by and large, we're talking financial. If you're happy, Philippa, it'd be a great opportunity as well for me to mention solar, because solar often comes part and parcel now with the financial element. As you know, we have the Low Carbon Workspaces programme that we've been running in Bucks and the surrounding areas since 2017, and before that in another format. Effectively, it's helping businesses to install energy upgrades on site to help them, reduce their bills. So we give a third of funding up to £5,000. Now, in phase one, technical talk, but between 2017 and 2019, we know that only 1 in 100 applications was for solar. Currently, 1 in 5 applications is for solar. So really that kind of, we don't have to go into why that is. It's very apparent that businesses recognise the huge cost and the fact that this is an opportunity to mitigate against them costs. A little question for you, Philippa. So solar, just so you know, lasts about 25 years. What do you think the return on investment for that is?
What, in terms of years?
Yeah, that's right, to pay it off.
10, 12 years?
You know what, Philippa? 3 years ago, you would have been spot on. So I should have asked you 3 years ago, about 10 years. Now, because of the abhorrent energy rates, if you take out a low carbon grant, the return on investment is now 3.5 years. So that means 21.5 years plus of pure profit. What's more, that's only going to be compounded if our rates continue to rise. So it really is important that businesses start to see these reductions in footprint and in energy use, not just as, well, it's good for the planet, it's what our customers want. Actually, no, it's for the survivability of your business. This is a real must. And, the sooner they kind of tackle that, the better, because each day it's only costing them.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, it's all part of being more resilient. Who knows what the next challenge that's going to come at businesses is going to be? And it is all part of an organisation's resilience to be able to mitigate against some of these horrendous impacts. So I alluded to some of the many reasons why BBF delayed our first steps on this journey to net zero. Are there any particular sectors that should be really focused on climate change, perhaps more than others?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess it depends very much. It depends very much what the outcome we're expecting is. Instantly, I want to say yes, manufacturing, as we'd imagine. Those who are in manufacturing, those who are listening in manufacturing, will know that what they're experiencing right now is torturous. The size of some of the bills we see from our members, it's excruciating. It's really painful, especially when you compare them to a like-for-like to previous years, knowing that the current market, it's not, the best place, is it, at the moment? And our businesses are facing this. So yeah, manufacturers, naturally, they're going to be really exposed to this pressure. However, I know that in Buckinghamshire, of course, we're proud of our micro businesses, which there are plenty of. And yes, whilst their bills may not be as big cumulatively, it's still important to state that their rate will be far higher than that of those big manufacturers. It's very much economies of scale. The more energy you buy, the better the rate is. So actually, our micro businesses are feeling that pinch too, even though they might think, well, I've just got a little office. Actually, pound for pound, it really is a dire position to be in. But I'd say, yeah, the majority is the manufacturers. And I think in turn, we have to be mindful that those businesses who are supplied by those manufacturers too will be, required to pass on a lot of these costs.
So there is an awful lot of support out there for Buckinghamshire businesses to help them reduce their carbon emissions and their impact on the planet. And you've started to bring some of those off the page for us. So you referred to boost your green credentials. You talked about low carbon workspaces. Is there anything else? And in sort of what's the best first step for the business to take in finding their way through this support?
Absolutely, and it goes back to that. It's the start of the journey, and there's so much at the moment. The market. You go online, you search Google, saturated with first steps. Look this way, go this way, and it is very overwhelming. It's very overwhelming, and the answer could be different depending on what kind of sector you come from. But ultimately, this is all practical stuff. You've got to really pull back to the real nuts and bolts. And I think that is the best way that businesses can kind of traverse this. So in the first instance, I'd say, they should be considering carbon footprinting. But that doesn't have to be a formal thing. It could even be that they, employees sit together of an organization and kind of just say, okay, well, where is our usage? Let's get it down. Let's see what our activity looks like. Even if it's informal, that really helps to draw in that attention. You'd asked about what other support was available. So yeah, as I said, we've got the low carbon scheme, which provides that funding. We've got Boost Green to help with carbon footprinting. Beyond that, though, we also have the Net Zero Collaboration Circle. So basically just a group of like-minded businesses within books who want to do that little bit more. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily, you know, the green heroes or they are the revolutionary trailblazers, but it's just those who perhaps want to go at it, perhaps holding hands with, you know, their peers. And I think that's a really strong way to do it. I think in Buckinghamshire we recognise that we have a culture, we have I don't know, would it be too contrived, Philippa, to say like a family feel to the membership?
We do, absolutely. A business community, yeah.
Absolutely. So I would say on the back of that, other businesses are going to experience the same things that you do in the difficulties. They're going to get the wins that you could get. And I think they'd be happy to share. I think this is a very collaborative thing, not something where we have to be, you know, mine is mine and yours is yours. And, you know, that will probably identify a lot of areas for cross-working, which is, you know, another thing we're very passionate about at BBF. So I would say, yeah, we've got the Net Zero Collaboration Circle, which people are welcome to join. But ultimately, we also have general advice, I think, because we have a team of environmentalists, and we often know that the support that's needed, it's not moving heaven and earth. It's often an introduction or a cheat sheet or a little practical spreadsheet that we can throw together. There's an awful lot we can do here. You know, we know how the businesses will be feeling with this, and one thing I would say is we would never ask businesses to undertake any efforts or measures that weren't important to them and were not going to benefit them in, you know, in real benefit. This really is something that can benefit them. And I think having that conversation, becoming empowered, and actually that transition's not too bad. I think we can look back at any point, can't we, in history, and there's always going to be these awful transitions where people aren't going to like it. Unfortunately, this is one we have to do. I think spreadsheets in the 70s, no one would have wanted to do one now. Everyone does a spreadsheet, don't they? And they seem very easy. And if you don't use a spreadsheet, I'd say, how are you listening to this podcast? Because if you can find this podcast, you should be able to use an Excel spreadsheet.
So I know that we as a team and as a business, we're very proud of the actions we've taken to reduce our carbon footprint. I know we've gone from carbon emissions of about 36 tonnes back in 2019 to 20 tonnes for the year 2021, and I know that we're going to be somewhere around 17 tonnes for this year. So we think this helps make us stand out as a responsible business. But equally, I'm listening to lots and lots of references about greenwashing, and it makes me just slightly wary. So what would you say to businesses who might be nervous about talking about their actions, and in some cases small actions, in case they're misinterpreted?
Yep, another great question there, Philippa. So I'd say, marketing very much is the second big benefit, you know, beyond the financial savings. Of course, saving the planet, but that's by the by. We'll put that to one side for today. So yes, it is important. And greenwashing, for those who don't know, is kind of the overselling of an environmental position or perhaps a step you've taken. And you know, I think ultimately, I'd just say, be realistic. Be realistic. Really think, what would I like to see from a business? But also understand that people are forgiving for smaller companies. If you've got rid of plastic cups, you know, at the water cooler in the office, a tweet or LinkedIn post is good. I wouldn't say call a press conference, but alternatively, you know, it might be that you're really undertaking some big transition, which you should feel confident to get the big guns out, you know, do a press release, speak with us, because chances are we can really coo about those successes. And we want to do that. I think, I don't know if you recall, there was an article a couple of years ago now, Philippa, and it was about the Heinz tomato sauce bottle cap had been re-engineered, and they were very proud to tell us that after $1.2 million of spend and 185,000 hours or something of kind of human resource, they've come up with this new cap that's it also took 8 years, new cap that's, you know, energy efficient and recyclable. Supposedly it didn't go down well, it went like a lead balloon. And I think the reason being that this is a big multinational who's taken 8 years to accomplish something. Now, I'm not besmirching any large multinational, but the point stands, you know, it's all relative. So yeah, be realistic with yourself, but know that if you are a micro or small business, you will be forgiven. And reach out to your consumers, ask what they want. You might be surprised. You know, say what's important to you. Do you care about me decarbing, or alternatively, do you want me investing back into, you know, the local community environmentally? Because there's no one size fits all here. So yeah, I think
Indeed.
it's all measured.
So thank you, Dan. We've covered an awful lot. Let's end on a note about the future. So I know COVID showed BBF ways of working that massively reduced our carbon footprint. And whilst I acknowledge that we won't maintain those drastic changes of behaviour, we do now have a mindset of not just going back to the way it was and having another lens that we use to challenge the way we do things. So what does the transition for our businesses look like? What are some of the options going to be as we go forward, and what are the likely time frames?
Yes, the long term, it is somewhat bleak, I think would be fair to say, and that might be an optimist's look on that, Philippa. What we're seeing at the moment in the energy market it really is unprecedented. That word gets used a lot, but this is nothing like this has been seen. We could go back to I'll ask you, when before the pandemic, before all of this, when life was much simpler, what do you recall as being the last big kind of seismic wave to hit the industry, to hit business?
So the last inflationary cycle was 2018, 2019. I can remember living through inflation, but this feels abnormal. The energy inflation is massive, something that I've not seen in my life.
Absolutely. So I wanted to take you a little further back to the 2008 financial crisis, Philippa, and what we saw off the back of that was actually the price of oil dropped by 4 times, supply and demand, of course, and that directly impacts the electric market. What we're seeing now is the complete opposite. We're not seeing the energy being reduced. We're seeing it actually going into the stratosphere. And I think that's really, really alarming. Businesses don't have the assurity or the certainty over their futures when it comes to their energy profiles. No contract can protect you there. The things that can protect you are, these steps that we're on about here, reducing by any means necessary every kilowatt hour off your bill. Now the government have set out this stage for us, which is a great starting point. It's a great foundation to build upon, that we need to be at net zero by 2050, but that's 28 years away, and we only have to look back 2 years to think that what we've experienced could never have been prophesized or foreseen. No, not at all. No matter how careful or prudent you were as a business. So I think essentially a lot of these changes won't be driven by the regulation as we once thought it would be. I used to think, right, great, let's really ramp up the penalties that we put on businesses. It's going to take a completely different turn, because the financial incentive is right there, right now for those businesses, and those businesses who carry out these steps are going to go a lot further. And unfortunately, we've already seen so many businesses fail as a result of their energy bills. And unfortunately, we look at Buckinghamshire. Well, in Buckinghamshire, I can tell you that the vast majority of our businesses, their energy profile is winter heavy. So this is really a calm before a storm for the businesses. So I think there's a real lot for businesses to look out for in the future. But I think what they need to be doing is not thinking long term and really trying to put actions in place that are short term, i.e., up to a year, more medium term that could, stretch to the next 5 years. Beyond then, it's going to be quite difficult to set the stage for yourself, because when we get there, it's going to look so different anyway. So I'd say don't overwhelm yourself. You said, I think journey starts, did you, with 1,000 steps?
Yeah.
I always go with eating the elephant, which is never a good thing as a vegan. And eating an oak tree is not the same, I can tell you, Philippa. So maybe I'll walk you 1,000 steps with you. But yeah, it's just a case of doing all you can and touching base, collaborating, speak with us, shout out. You know, anything you're hearing, let us know. Any problems you're experiencing, we really want to know. You know, I think the very last thing I'd like to touch on, Philippa, is kind of the think global, shop local. I'm a big proponent for globalism, but it's really important when we talk about like net zero collaboration circles and this community, this family we've got in books. That can be of assistance in more ways than we realize. So even with supply chain, you know, be unconventional in spotting those opportunities locally. And I know it's easier said than done, but I think we'll have a lot more patience, understanding, ability to quickly adapt with one another than we would do if we're shopping further afield or just purely importing. So yes, I think it's a bad place to be in, but at least you're in Buckinghamshire and you get this
And we
support.
can help. And we can help.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dan. You've been amazing, and your insight, as always, is hugely valued. So I have no doubt that we will talk again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Philippa.